sit back in your seats, get something to eat, and watch this movie. Don't let the kiddies see it, because, well, we'll let you hear the beginning first. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Evan, and you are listening to Left of the Projector. I'm here with Smirk Gently to discuss our film of the week, Office Space, directed by Mike Judge, featuring Ron Livingston, Jennifer Aniston, David Herman. The film came out in 1999 and is still kind of a classic today, so thank you for joining me. I know this movie came out quite a while ago, 20 plus years. Do you think that the movie, holds up over all this time?
I think it definitely does. I think even more so now for me that I'm a little bit older than I was when I saw it first, because I don't think I watched it when it first came out. And apparently a lot of people didn't, because it didn't do well in theaters. I probably saw it when I was in high school, but now actually having worked in a lot of places, I think it's even more relevant than it was then.
Yeah, I definitely did not see this movie in the theater. I was in high school as well, aging myself a little bit, but I don't remember it wasn't popular. I had it on DVD, which I was just discussing how I had, you bought DVDs because there was no other way to watch the movie. But, you can see the themes, of kind of monotonous office work, encapsulating, the modern PMC and, the workforce of lots of unnecessary people. I don't know if that resonates maybe with your own personal work experience or just seeing how office work is today.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I haven't worked specifically in offices. Like, I've done office work, but mostly from home, and I used to be a restaurant manager. And there's definitely a lot of levels of unnecessary management in those types of environments. Yeah, in a sense, I think it's kind of like a good metaphor for just useless bureaucracy, just levels of like people to answer to, where everything just gets bogged down in the process. Like nobody's really contributing anything to this. It's just somebody else to tell you the same thing over and over again.
It's just a bunch of cogs that don't need each other at all. And it's interesting you say you worked in restaurants, because is a layer of the movie with Jennifer Aniston being a waitress at a restaurant, Tchotchkes.
Yeah.
Which you could say is the equivalent of TGI Fridays. But yeah, I think the movie, I also work from home and have for a while, but I did used to work in an office, and there was that level of, does this person really necessary, or is that person really necessary? So I definitely, can appreciate some of that aspect to it and the monotonous nature of some of it. And I really thought just the opening scene was kind of a sad memory of mine of commuting by car to work, where they're in bumper to bumper traffic and you change lanes and that lane goes slow and then you change the other lane. I don't know. Yeah. I just thought that the movie had a perfect opening.
I also love when Michael's in the car and he's listening to his music really loudly, and then somebody walks by and he like closes the window and locks the door and just like shrinks down in his seat. And then you see his cubicle later on, and it's just posters. Like there's one of Snoop, and then there's like, I think like Marines or something. There's like military posters, and then like Snoop and like a bunch of other rappers and stuff. It's just like a really weird juxtaposition.
But as far as the general layout of the movie for the folks who maybe haven't seen it, the protagonist Peter is played by Ron Livingston. He hates his job. He doesn't want to do the things he's told to do. He's expressing what I think so many people hide or maybe lie to themselves about. They don't like their job. They don't like sitting at a desk. They don't like doing the little silly things that their manager tells you, the famous, TPS reports. And I think that's a really good opening scene to show you every little bit as you're getting into the office. Kind of, he's unhappy, but then as he gets to his desk, he's miserable. So I think the film kind of gives a good layout in that. And you can also maybe share some of the things you noticed. He is talking with this guy Lumberg, who's maybe the villain of the movie, is just office work and capitalism, but he has his own parking space out front. Like he has all these privileges, and he does nothing.
Yeah, he walks around with a cup of coffee and leans on people's cubicles and just talks nonsense at them for a couple minutes at a time, and moves on with his day, and that's it.
Yeah, he really doesn't. And then they have I don't know, the phrase that they use where they say, sounds like someone got a case of the Mondays. Is that from this movie? Did this movie create that line?
I think it was either that or Garfield. I don't know which one. I don't know which one did it first. But yeah, I mean, I've seen it on stuff associated with the movie because it kind of became like a cult thing after they started showing it on Comedy Central a bunch, like a few years after it came out.
I thought that the opening is good, and then you kind of get a glimpse a little bit of his coworkers, and I remember I didn't remember the scene from the very beginning of the film, which I think is quite funny, and when his girlfriend invites him to see this occupational hypnotherapist, which I didn't know was actually a real thing to improve your mental health, and the guy, the hypnotherapist keels over and dies in front of him, and he has an epiphany, which is kind of like the point of the movie kind of changes, and his entire outlook on life changes.
Yeah, and it's weird because I had kind of thought after seeing it a few times, like years ago, that was what, I don't know. I thought maybe the idea was that he had just kind of like, he had been hypnotized and he was very much blissed out. He goes home and he sleeps through the entire Saturday, right? And then I thought it was that he was basically still in that state. But you see it kind of like, as you'll explain going through the plot more, it kind of falls apart a little bit as time goes on. But yeah, the hypnotherapist thing I think was very much popular at that time, like late 90s, early 2000s. It's a very niche thing. I don't think like just anybody was going to see one, but it was like a trend thing. Like people were doing that. It sounds like something they do at like a team building retreat, you know.
So after he gets into the office, it's already 9:00 and he can't even stand being at work, or it's 9:20. And so he gets his workers and they all go to Tchotchke's, TGI Fridays type restaurant. He kind of wishes he could go say hi to Jennifer Aniston's character. And then I think when they leave the restaurant, which I think is a funny scene, and maybe you have some thoughts on it, but when they're leaving and talking about quitting their job or having to leave because there might be downsizing, as one of the other people from work runs in and tells them they're going to be downsizing, he makes a comment. I don't have the quote directly, but he kind of says that he doesn't want to stand in line with the other welfare, idiots or scumbags,
yeah,
I think he calls them.
Scumbags, yeah.
Which I thought was a pretty interesting, it's kind of a throwaway line, but being that it's late 90s, it's like end of the Clinton era welfare reform. I thought that line was on purpose, and it was to demonize welfare for sure.
Very, very Mike Judge. Yeah, that was like a reminiscent of King of the Hill and a lot of his other stuff. That was, yeah.
I think that the other character in the movie, there's a lot of small bit characters, and I again, blanking on his name, but the coworker who tells them that they might get downsized, and they get back to the office and they're discussing, and he tells them that he had this great idea, or wishes that he could have invented the pet rock, or, everyone could create this idea and then you'd be a millionaire. And I thought that kind of also plays into the idea in our system now of, oh, well, I'm just one idea away from being a millionaire. And I thought that his character encompassed that pretty well. I don't know what you thought of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was about to look up his name because I'm like, I know it and it's escaping me too. But yes, that like get rich quick, like you're just, it can happen to you, that American dream. All you got to do is have that one great idea, the jump to conclusions, Matt, right? And then you'll be Elon or whoever it would have been at that time.
Yeah, I wrote down that it was like, even a white collar middle class kind of person could become a millionaire when he's, potentially being laid off to do monotonous work in his office. But yeah, he's gonna. And then I think after this scene, he gets back to his apartment. And actually, one thing I never noticed, which I thought was very funny, is that I noticed that his apartment complex is called Morningwood Apartment Complex.
Yeah, yes, I saw that when I was just watching it again the other day. I never noticed that before.
But he lived in like this crummy apartment that had walls. You could hear his neighbor through it. And, but as soon as he gets home, he's able to release and relax and has a beer, and his neighbor comes over and they're talking, and if the apartment really plays into it. But yeah, he's, so after this point, he goes to the hypnotherapist. He has this epiphany. And I believe the next thing they do is they're in the office again. And another funny thing I noticed was they had this big banner up that said, "Is this good for the company?" Which feels very on the nose, but I feel like everything in this movie was very on the nose. one of the funniest scenes, maybe in the whole movie or the collection of scenes, is when they're all going to see the Bobs, the two, consultant people. I found that whole thing very funny. And it's where, three of the different people are now explaining what they have to do at work, or the first guy is explaining what he does. And
yeah. And then, so so that guy's name is Tom Smikowski, the guy who runs out. He's like, I don't want to end up on the welfare line with those scumbags. So he's sitting there and he's so anxious because he already knows what's coming. And he just bubbles over. He's like, I'm a people person. I'm good with people. And they're just like, no, you're gone. And what's funny with that is, but the whole point of bringing in the consultants when companies do this, and even restaurants do it, which is like, I mean, for places that supposedly have really razor thin margins, they waste a lot of money on crap like this. But they'll bring in consultants to see, okay, where can we trim the fat? Where can we save money? But they end up getting rid of hourly employees or salaried, like lower level people like this guy. And then they end up bringing up Peter and putting him in the same, just yet another position of management that is completely unnecessary in this company that's already bloated with like way more managers than it needs.
The next scene from there is when you see Peter goes to see Jennifer Aniston's character at the restaurant. She's having this sort of like conversation with her boss over her 15 pieces of flair. This movie is chock full of classic scenes, and I don't know, that whole scene is pretty funny. And she doesn't, what does she gain from doing more than the bare minimum at this minimum wage waitress job at a crummy chain restaurant?
Exactly, because it's already debasing, and I'm allowed to say this because I did it for like 10 years. You go in, and the people who are annoying you the most, I mean, granted, the customers are annoying about half the time, but the people who annoy you the most and ask you to do this pointless crap aren't really the ones paying you, because you're getting the sub-minimum tipped wage. But yeah, what motivation would you possibly have to just go above board like that weirdo that she works with who's just like way too stoked to be there? Like, yeah, let me put on 37 pieces of flair.
The coworker is really over the top, excited about his job.
We've all worked with somebody like that, and you're like, what are you getting out of this? This is bizarre. Like, why are you so happy to be here? It's exhausting, but what a lot of these places do, and if it's corporate, without obviously Chopke's would be because it's based on Fridays, they have secret shoppers that come in and they grade you on whether or not you hit like certain key points they want you to say. Like when that weird, I can't remember that weirdo's name, but the coworker, and he's like, can I interest you in some flingers or whatever? And he just like lists off a bunch of things, and he's like jumping around. Like they grade you on that. They have key points that they want you to say and how much you're smiling. And it's very weird, very weird. A lot of weird oversight you're getting anyway, 90% of the time.
Yes, I think so. First, what happens is, I think we mentioned already, but that's when I think he goes to the Bobs himself, and I wrote this funny line where he says, it's not that I'm lazy, it's just that I don't care. And I feel like that's it kind of encapsulates the whole thing. And, he says, I'll probably put this little line in too, but he says, it's a problem of motivation. All right. I do something wrong and 8 different bosses come over and tell me. And my note that I wrote to myself here was, they're stealing his labor. He's not seeing anything from it. And he's even telling them this. He says, if your profits go up and you sell some more doohickeys, I don't see a dime. So what's in it for me? And it's pretty awesome. He's had his epiphany, and he's just saying probably what a lot of people are thinking right now in their everyday job.
Yeah, I would imagine so, especially with the past year or two with record profits and stagnant wages, and nobody can afford to live where they live. Yeah, and I think they mentioned to him like, oh, would you be interested in like a profit sharing thing or something? He's like, I don't know, maybe. Well, he's already kind of checked out. But after a while, you're just so beaten down that something like that, I feel like that's something that a lot of companies bring up as a possibility, but don't usually follow through with. It's just to keep people around a little bit longer until they can find somebody to replace them. you know.
And one other character we didn't mention, I think, at all, and there's only been a couple small scenes, and there's one line that I thought was very funny about the Office conversations too, is they're talking about
Milton?
Milton, yes, Milton. So they're talking about Milton, and they say that he's been getting paid, but he's not supposed to be there. He's fired, and they say, so it will just work itself out from here on out. We try to avoid confrontation whenever possible. And I like burst into laughter because it's perfect.
It's like the passive aggressive work culture of just, we're not gonna confront you. We're not gonna even really tell you what's happening. So like working in restaurant management, very similar thing. We would see, and I managed at a couple different places, and we would see the owners like every once in a while. The most recent place, not very often at all. But we would see them, and sometimes we'd have absolutely pointless meetings. And then while they're there, they don't say anything of substance. They're not talking to anybody directly. They're not really doing anything. And then they leave. After the fact, when you can't do anything about it, they point out everything they've seen wrong. You're like, well, wouldn't it make more sense to just tell me while I can fix it?
That's like the funny scene with the interviews from the consultants, the Bobs, was the character whose name is Michael Bolton, which is another amazingly funny joke to the movie. Again, very Mike Judge but he's talking to the Bobs, and one of them is saying, what's your favorite song? And he's like, I don't know, I can't choose one. He says, I celebrate his entire catalog, and it's just like,
yeah.
And then I think he says, oh, you could change your name to Mike, but it's like, I had that name first.
Yeah. Why should I change? Yeah, he's very repressed. The guy's got a lot of problems.
And then other thing too, and then maybe it's worth talking about some of the themes, and we can get to the kind of the final. I guess it's more like the middle of the movie, but they also talk in the Bobs are saying how they're going to fire Samir and Michael Bolton, and they say, we're just going to fire them and hire some people right out of college. It's a standard procedure.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I was surprised the last couple times I watched it that they didn't just say unpaid intern, because that's what a lot of these places do too. Any experience is how they pay people a lot of the time, especially if it's anything to do with the tech industry, because that's their whole thing, right? They're doing this like software, and they're just switching things over for the 2000 switch. They're
changing the code over for the Y2K switch, which is also kind of funny because I think back to when that happened and how like everyone thought that the world was going to, explode. But I think just in general, I don't know if you have any other just kind of...
Yeah, and there's Milton, too, is the impetus for the whole thing. Just slowly getting more beaten down every day. They keep making him move his desk, and he's sitting there, and he's listening to his radio, and it sounds like talk radio or something, and he's right near Peter, and that's the only time he interacts with anybody besides Lumbergh, is like right in the beginning when Peter's like, hey, man, can you turn that down a little bit? It's like, well, they said if what's-her-face can listen to her headphones while she's filing, then I can listen to my radio while I'm collating from 9 to 11 a.m. And then every now and again, they just throw in those scenes with him to try and to kind of like tie everything together. And I love that because, the whole thing is based on the Milton shorts that Mike Judge did.
Yes, but yeah, the scenes with Milton are all very funny. That very fun scene. Everything he says is like in a very mumbly voice. Where's my stapler? I feel like is a highly quoted kind of line,
Well, they didn't even really have those when the movie was made. Swingline decided to release them after the movie got really popular. They made red Swingline staplers just because of that.
Final third of the movie now is the decision after they're all fired to scam their company out of, they say hundreds of thousands, but scam them out of money by stealing little bits of data or numbers, rounding errors at the end of their transactions. And so they're going to have this really cool scene where they, Jedi the disk to get it copied and upload the virus, which, is very funny as well.
Yeah, especially since in like the late 90s and early 2000s, there were a bunch of those like hacker type movies. I can't remember.
Hackers and then the Net with Sandra Bullock.
Yes. Oh my God. The Net. Yeah. They do the handoff and everything. It's very slick. It's like behind the back and like nobody's paying attention because after that it pans out and the office is just like continuing as usual. Nobody's paying attention. You can still hear the woman in the background. It's like, corporate accounts payable. How can I help you? Or where can I direct your call?
How many calls was she getting? I feel like she's saying that every 2 seconds. How many calls are they getting?
Yeah, and that would be enough to drive somebody crazy. I wonder if that's what did it for Milton, honestly, because just the sound of that constantly.
So they hatch this plan, which is kind of ridiculous. They execute the plan, and now another very funny scene in the film is where they go to Tom's house for this party because he gets hit by a drunk driver when he's about to kill himself, and so he changes his mind, gets hit by a car, gets a huge $1 million plus settlement, which is ironic because he was talking about how, this is his moment to hit it big with his big idea of accidentally getting hit by a car. They go to his house and he shows them the funny jump to conclusions map. But anything you noticed about that found funny?
When Peter's talking to that one guy with the spiky, almost like Guy Fieri do, and he's like, oh wait, this was before that. Before they go to the party, when he finds out what happens to Tom, and that guy is like, yeah, he got hit by a truck. Lucky bastard, he got $1 million out of it. And then they show him like a second later and he's in like a full body cast. Like the dude is completely immobile. That's poignant because who among us hasn't thought, man, if I could just get hit by a truck and get like a good settlement. Yeah, that's the other side of the American dream. You invent the pet rock or you get hit by a truck.
But then the one thing that I didn't remember so much, and maybe this was like the one little bit of kind of like misogynistic kind of behavior in the movie, is when that guy, spiky hair guy, tells Ron Livingston's character that his girlfriend had slept with Lumbergh, which we don't find out until later is a different Lumbergh. And he like flips out and he goes off running the car and goes on and on. And I felt like that's like the one point in the movie where you really dislike him. I mean, maybe at the time when I saw this, I may not have had that thought, but now I see it and I think,
yeah, that's when I feel like at that point is when his very like chill, like hypnotized vibe kind of goes out the window. That's the point at which for me, I notice it start to break because he starts getting really in his head about her having supposedly slept with this guy who he absolutely hates and who makes his life miserable at work. Yeah, and of course it's like crappy and misogynistic because why do you care who she slept with before?
They break up seemingly break up for a little bit. Yeah. And I think what I think then happens is she is now very upset by this and she ends up quitting her job too. Or I think we find out that she gets fired later for flicking off her boss again for questioning her flair, which is also pretty. Yeah.
So we mentioned how that was based on Fridays. I guess Mike Judge went to Fridays a few years after the movie came out, and he noticed that the people working there weren't wearing the buttons and everything anymore. And they asked one of the managers, like, what's the deal with that? You guys used to wear all this cool stuff. And he's like, oh, well, after Office Space came out, people kept making jokes about it. So there was a decision made by corporate to say, like, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. Nobody has to wear the flare.
Perfectly fits in. I'm sure anyone who was watching at the time knew that it was TGI Fridays, but I didn't put that obvious connection together.
Yeah.
The whole weekend goes by, they go on to this party, and they wake up the next week, and the money accidentally is all stolen at one time. And so they've now stolen like $300,000, and they don't know what to do. And they're all freaking out. They think they're going to go to jail. They're hatching a plan how they can give the money back, and they're finding out what it would be like to go to jail. And there's all these little bits to that. And now he is deciding, okay, well, I've screwed up. I'm going to admit it. I'm going to go back to my good character, away from this guy who finally realizes that they got him caught by being this jerk. And so he's writes a letter with a check, and he's going to go take it back to his office and give them back the money, which is pretty funny to me that he's going to give back this giant corporation all this money. But I guess it beats going to prison. Yeah,
he puts it in traveler's checks and he puts it in a Lumbergh store. The thing that you may be thinking that you forgot. They talk about how to launder the money. What does that mean?
Yes.
So they look it up in the dictionary to conceal the source of cash. And so the guy, at that point, the guy knocks on the door and they open it. And he's like, I used to be addicted to crack. Now I sell magazines. And like, wait, you used to be addicted to crack? And he's like, why? Like, do you know drugs? We need to launder some money. And they go through the whole thing. And the guy's like, listen, I was not addicted to crack. I was a software engineer. So he used to do the same exact thing as the, I always want to call it interchode, but it's called intertrode. And he got laid off and now he's selling magazine subscriptions and they have to buy him off, which with 50 subscriptions to Vibe, I think, to keep him quiet because they just basically confessed to this guy.
Yes, I feel like the magazine that they chose was pretty funny and perfect.
Yeah, it is Orlando Jones.
I should have had all of them.
Yeah. His name was Steve. Yeah. Steve, the magazine guy. Yeah.
They don't even, they're so bad at being criminals that they don't even know what money laundering is. Like, well, if these idiots who are in the mob can do it, how come we can't do it? He takes the money to the office, he slips it under the door, and within seconds he has second thoughts. I can't do this. This is stupid. He tries to get the money out, but obviously it's too late. He leaves the office, and I believe he goes home, or does he might go see Jennifer Aniston now to say that he's sorry and he regrets this. And they make up and they get back together, and she's now working at one of the other restaurants that's in this, supposed. At this point, we've discussed how Milton is getting angrier and angrier and angrier. And I think what they show you in the scene where he slides the money underneath the door is the red swing line stapler is in the office.
Yep.
Is sitting on Lumbergh's desk. And Milton comes into the office on Monday and he wants his stapler back because presumably they're telling him he has to leave, and he's trying to get into the door and he can't get in there, and they forcibly remove him. And then you kind of the shot away from the restaurant, from the office. And then moments later we see that the building is on fire. At first you think like, oh, maybe it was Milton because he mumbles, oh, I could light this place on fire throughout the movie. And I think this is the point where where Ron Livingston decides, well, I guess they all have no job, and he decides to be a construction worker with his neighbor. He now feels like he's more empowered. He gets to work outside. He's not stuck in the monotony of the office. And so it's interesting that, a lot of people who work at office jobs probably do wish they could have some kind of outside.
Yeah. I mean, you're stuck inside all day dealing with the same people. And what I thought was interesting is him and Lawrence live in the same building. Like, they live in the same exact apartment complex. Presumably they're paying the same amount in rent, but Lawrence seems to be way more content. He doesn't mind his job. He's tired at the end of the day, but he's not nearly as miserable as Peter is. And I think that kind of, in the beginning, it's something that bothers Peter, because he asks him, he's like, when you're at work, does anybody say to you, it sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays? And Lawrence is like, no. And at that point, he's already kind of thinking like, wow, what is what I'm doing right now worth it if I could be doing the same exact thing as this guy and still be in this exact same situation, but not be miserable all the time? So it's nice how it kind of comes full circle that way.
I hadn't thought about the fact that they do live in virtually the same thing. I think when he asked him if someone says, do you ever have a case of the Mondays? Yeah. He says, if you say something like that, you get your ass kicked, I think is what he says, which, you would never say that, because it's supposedly tough guys at a construction site. He now can presumably make the same amount of money, but now he's happy. He's now has a content job. His girlfriend, Jennifer Aniston, is going to, bring him lunch, at work. Oh, he brought his lunch pail, I think, which is I guess Jennifer Aniston's not going to bring him lunch. He's going to visit him, but he had his lunch pail, which I thought is a kind of a throwaway line, but I picture like a construction worker with their metal lunch pail. Opening up with the thermos too. But yeah, so the very final scene of the whole movie is after the fire is you think it's going to go to the credits, but then it goes to presumably Mexico or somewhere south of the border, and Milton is on a beach drinking a Mai Tai and complaining about which drink he got and mumbling the fact that he's now free and rich and has hundreds of thousands of dollars. And he also in a sense became was able to go rags to riches from doing nothing. He got lucky and he won the lottery just finding money on the ground. I think the movie overall has it's very funny, touched on some of the office, modern things, but I don't know if you had any last thoughts on just generally the themes of the movie and how you see them today. I know we kind of talked about that already, but any final thoughts on it?
Like I said, I think it definitely holds up. Because the culture of work, specifically as it relates to a lot of what seem to be incredibly unnecessary, just like layers of the same position that multiple people are filling, that definitely resonates most industries, I would say. It's funny that everybody but Peter and Peter and Milton, everybody else that we know of ends up in kind of the same exact position they were before. Like Jennifer Aniston kind of, it's like a lateral move. She goes to another restaurant, but it's not as much of a pain in the ass. But she's not really a person who's job is a defining factor for her. It's just kind of a means to an end. And Tom getting all that money from the settlement, but he still, for some reason, thinks he needs to invent that goofy, the goofy Matt thing. But Samir and Michael both end up working at Intertrode, which is the competing software company. Everybody kind of, just like very lateral, okay, move over this way. But Peter, on some level, does move into something that fits him better, and hopefully, at least it seems, he's not as miserable.
All the characters in The Office, I feel like fills the roles of people you would, encounter in an office. You have kind of like the young guy with the spiky hair who's like, talking about women, and the non-white software engineer, and the middle. I think they also show Lumbergh as turns 41 in the movie, in his birthday, which I thought also was maybe interesting. He's this high-level middle manager, and he's 41. Yeah. I don't know if that's, but yeah, the movie to me really, hits all the real office kind of, office life. It's captured very well. I can't think of any other movie where they really, before that movie at all, that dissected office life other than a scene or two. Like I think of Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, where, she's working in the office and they have those different scenes, but it's not the same culture. That's like a fashion kind of thing, but you never really have the idea of being in an office. And when they do have it, it's super glamorous in some sense.
Yeah, and then the movies that predated that, where they show business thing and like working in offices and climbing the corporate ladder, a lot of them that came out in like the 80s and 90s absolutely glamorized that, made it look like that's what it was about. But they weren't showing, the like peons like Samir and Michael and Peter. It was salespeople, the hustle culture. It definitely made it seem like it was more working girl. Melanie Griffith. That one did show how shitty it was, but they made it look like it was just her boss.
I know it's not at all the same kind of movie, a horror movie, but like American Psycho, they're these crazy hedge fund rich guys but they're all competing over their business cards, and it's like this, there's like the top echelon where, in this movie, it's the people that are making his life possible.
Who have to worry about cutbacks because they're the first ones on the chopping block. To circle back to what you were saying about like the Hawaiian shirt, this is what I was trying to remember before. The Hawaiian shirts and like, oh, you get cake when it's somebody's birthday. That is a thing across like every industry that I've ever worked in. Anything to give you a crumb, but not pay you anymore. Like nothing that really costs them anything. Just like as a treat, you can wear jeans on Friday. Okay, I can't pay my rent, but thank you. I'll take out some jeans and wear them on Friday.
Yeah, they're just to like make you feel appreciated in the very slightest way, superficially. It's a superficial Band-Aid on your gaping hole of dread.
But if you think about it, it starts in school, elementary school. If you do well, if your class does really well. I remember teachers would do like pizza parties if everybody did all their reading before a certain deadline. We would do a pizza party in class, and that just carries over. It's like, that's nice. I'm glad to have pizza, but I can get pizza anytime. I would like to be paid fairly.
All right. Well, that covers our movie this week, Office Space, by Mike Judge. And I want to thank you again, Smirk Gently, for joining me here to discuss the film.
Yeah, thank you. I had a lot of fun. I did have some fun facts. All right.
Oh, yeah. I love to hear some fun facts.
Awesome. Okay, so a couple. When they decided to make it into a feature-length film from the Milton shorts, that was how they approached Mike Judge. They were like, we love these. Let's make a movie. And he said, nobody wants to see what this guy does at home after work. It has to be focused on other people. He could be in it, but nobody wants to. And I'm like curious, what would he do after work? I don't want to see it, but there's like a morbid curiosity I have where I'm like, I gotta know. And then they wanted to, coming right off of Good Will Hunting, I guess it was the same studio, they suggested Matt Damon and Ben Affleck for this movie. And I'm just trying to picture that, like who, I don't remember when I was reading about it at one point, who they were picturing in what role, but I want very badly to visit the alternate universe where that was a thing, just to see what that would be like.
He would come into the office and say, "Hey, Lumbergh, do you like apples?"
And they were so young then too. They were like babies.
That would be.
Oh, and then the other one was,
Yes, that would be weird. That would be an alternate universe.
That would be unsettling. The other thing was that apparently Madonna saw the movie at some point and told Mike Judge that she thought Michael Bolton's anger was sexy. I don't know what to do with that. It's in my brain and now it's in yours. Michael Bolton was on Mad TV, right? And he wanted out. And that was the other thing. He wanted to get out of Mad TV because he was tired of it, because by that point it was getting a little stale. So Mike Judge was like, hey, you can be in this movie, because he had already done some voice work for King of the Hill, which had already done one season. So he went to a table read, Michael Bolton's character, the actor playing Michael Bolton, and he just screamed all his lines so they would fire him so he would be free to do this movie.